Before the world trembled at the sound of their dragon ships, there was only the north, a harsh, unforgiving land of endless winters, jagged fjords, and dark, ancient forests. To understand the Vikings, one must understand the soil that shaped them. In this frozen twilight, survival was not a guarantee. It was a daily battle against nature itself. The Norsemen did not fear the cold, nor did they fear death. Their gods, Odin, the all-father of wisdom and war, Thor, the thunderous defender of mankind, and Freyr, the bringer of fertility, were not distant deities of pure mercy. They were complex, demanding, and bound by the laws of fate. Every warrior knew that a quiet death from old age or sickness was a tragedy. The ultimate glory was to die in the chaos of battle, with a blade in hand, so that the Valkyries would carry their souls to Valhalla, the grand hall of the slain. There they would feast, drink, and fight, until the end of the world. Driven by this fierce belief, the frozen borders of Scandinavia could no longer contain them. The turning point came in the late 8th century. Population growth, scarce fertile land, and political unrest forced the young and daring to look toward the sea. They built ships unlike anything the world had ever seen, drakars, carved with terrifying dragon heads, capable of crossing open oceans and sailing up shallow rivers. They were ghosts on the water, moving with deadly silence. In the year 793, the peaceful mists of the English coast were shattered. On a small holy island called Lindisfarne, Christian monks lived in quiet prayer, guarding ancient treasures and sacred relics. They had no walls, no weapons, and no fear, believing the sea and their faith would protect them. They were wrong. On a cold June morning, the sails of the Northmen appeared on the horizon. Within hours, the holy monastery of Lindisfarne was turned into a scene of absolute devastation. The Norse warriors struck with terrifying speed and brutality. They plundered the gold, burned the sacred texts, and left the island in ruins. The news of the sack of Lindisfarne sent a shockwave of pure terror through Christian Europe. It was a cultural earthquake. Scholars and kings asked themselves what sins they had committed to bring such demons upon their shores. They did not yet know that this was not a random raid. It was the opening roar of a new era. The Viking Age had officially begun. As the smoke from Lindisfarne cleared, a new figure emerged from the shifting mists of Scandinavia, a man whose name would soon strike absolute terror into the hearts of kings. His name was Ragnar Lothbrok. But before he was a living myth, before he was a king, Ragnar was a nobody. He was a simple Bondi, a free Norse farmer and hunter, working a modest plot of rocky land beneath the cold northern skies. Yet, while other men were content with the soil, Ragnar's eyes were always fixed on the horizon of the vast, open sea. He possessed a rare, restless mind and a dangerous ambition. Ragnar believed with every fiber of his being that he was destined for greatness, claiming to be a direct descendant of Odin, the All-Father of wisdom and wanderers. In an era when most Norsemen only sailed eastward to familiar shores, Ragnar dreamed of the mysterious, wealthy lands to the west. The local rulers, the powerful jarls, mocked his ambitions, calling his dreams a foolish suicide mission into an empty ocean. But Ragnar was not just a dreamer. He was a brilliant innovator. To navigate the treacherous, fog-choked waters of the North Sea without a magnetic compass, he utilized a legendary tool, the Viking Sunstone. This magical crystal, made of Iceland spar, could polarize light, allowing Ragnar to locate the position of the sun even through thick storm clouds and heavy mist. Armed with this secret navigation and a small, loyal crew of daring warriors who risked everything to follow him, Ragnar launched a series of secret, highly successful raids. With every longship that returned to port overflowing with silver, Anglo-Saxon treasures, and foreign livestock, Ragnar's influence grew. He was no longer just a farmer. The common people saw him as a leader chosen by the gods. When the jealous local jarl tried to crush him, Ragnar fought back, defeating the old ruler in open combat and claiming the title of jarl for himself. Soon, through strategic alliances and sheer battlefield brilliance, he united shattered clans and became a legendary king, a konung. Ragnar changed the face of medieval warfare forever. He realized that the true riches of the West were not just on isolated islands, but deep within the hearts of great empires. His most daring masterstroke came in the year 845, when he assembled a massive fleet of over 100 dragon ships and sailed straight up the river Seine into the very heart of the Frankish Empire. His target was Paris. The great walled city seemed impregnable, but Ragnar's warriors struck with a psychological brutality that completely paralyzed the defenders. They hanged captured soldiers in full view of the city walls, shattering the morale of the Frankish defenders. Paris fell to a farmer from the north. Instead of destroying the ancient city, Ragnar used it as leverage. The Frankish king, Charles the Bald, desperate to save his capital, offered Ragnar an astronomical ransom, 7,000 pounds of silver and gold. It was the first Danegeld, a massive tribute paid to the Northmen just to make them go away. Ragnar accepted, proving to the entire world that mighty empires could be brought to their knees, not just by iron, but by fear. But a life lived by the sword always demands a violent end. Ragnar's insatiable hunger for glory eventually led him to the shores of Northumbria in Anglo-Saxon England. He sought to conquer the entire kingdom with only 2 ships, a display of ultimate arrogance. This time, his legendary luck ran out. His forces were overwhelmed, and Ragnar was captured alive by King Ella of Northumbria. King Ella wished to make a horrific example of the pagan pirate. He ordered a deep pit to be dug, filled with hundreds of venomous, starving snakes. Bound, weaponless, and stripped of his armor, Ragnar was cast into the dark pit. As the vipers bit into his flesh, injecting their deadly poison, Ragnar did not scream, weep, or beg for mercy. Instead, he laughed. With his dying breaths, he chanted a final defiant poem, looking up at his executioners with bloody teeth. He smiled through the agonizing pain and uttered a terrifying prophecy that would haunt England for generations. How the young pigs will grunt when they hear how the old boar suffered. He was speaking of his ferocious sons, Bjorn Ironside, Ivar the Boneless, Sigurd Snake in the Eye, and Ubba. Ragnar Lothbrok closed his eyes, his soul departing for the golden roaring halls of Valhalla. But his death was not an end. It was a catalyst. The old boar was dead, and the young pigs were about to tear the world apart. The year is 866. The Anglo-Saxon kingdoms of England, long accustomed to dealing with small, disjointed bands of Viking raiders, look out at the sea in absolute horror. The horizon is choked with black sails. This was not a raid. It was an invasion. Led by the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok, the great heathen army landed on the shores of East Anglia. Sagas claim it numbered thousands of hardened warriors, bound together by a single dark purpose: revenge. The brothers were a terrifying council of war. Bjorn Ironside brought the unstoppable muscle of a legendary warrior. Sigurd, Snake in the Eye, possessed the cold, piercing gaze of a strategist. But the mind behind the entire campaign belonged to Ivar the Boneless. Do not let his name deceive you. According to lore, Ivar could not walk. His legs were said to be soft as cartilage. He was carried into battle on a shield, leading his men with a brilliant, psychopathic intellect. Where others used brute force, Ivar used cunning. He manipulated the divided English kings, playing them against one another, slowly cutting off Northumbria from any hope of help. By the winter of 867, the great heathen army marched into York. King Aelle, the man who had thrown Ragnar into the pit of vipers, suddenly found himself trapped, outmaneuvered, and utterly abandoned. His armies were crushed, his crown was shattered, and now the young pigs finally had the man who slaughtered the old boar. The sagas tell of a brutal ritual performed upon King Aelle, a punishment reserved only for the most hated enemies, meant to deny them entrance to the afterlife. It was called the Blood Eagle. On the cold stone of the battlefield, Aelle was forced onto his knees. With agonizing precision, the shape of an eagle with outstretched wings was carved into his back. His ribs were severed from his spine, pulled outward to resemble wings, and salt was rubbed into the open wounds. Through all of this, the victim was expected to remain silent. If he screamed, his soul would never enter Valhalla. King Aelle did not survive the night. With Northumbria fallen and their father avenged, the sons of Ragnar did not pack up and leave. They had looked upon the green, fertile lands of England and decided to stay. The map of Britain was rewritten in blood, establishing the Danelaw, a vast territory ruled by Norse law and Norse swords. The fury of the Northmen had broken a kingdom, but their hunger for the unknown was far from satisfied. While one brother conquered England, another looked toward the dark, uncharted horizons of the West. While the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok carved their names into the soil of England, other Norsemen looked toward the open, terrifying horizon of the North Atlantic. They were not driven by the desire for revenge, but by an insatiable hunger for the unknown. In the year 982, a fierce and hot-tempered warrior named Erik the Red was banished from Iceland for murder. Sailing into the freezing mists, he discovered a massive, icy island. To lure settlers to this harsh new realm, he gave it a clever, inviting name: Greenland. But it was Erik's son, Leif Erikson, who would cement his family's name into eternal legend. Around the year 1000, Leif listened to the tales of a merchant who had been blown off course and claimed to have seen timber-rich lands even further west. Intrigued, Leif bought the merchant's ship, gathered a crew of 35 men, and retraced the dangerous route into the blank spaces of the map. They sailed past desolate lands of stone and massive glaciers until they hit a breathtaking coast. It was a land of dense, ancient forests, rivers teeming with salmon larger than any they had seen in Europe, and fields of wild grapes. Leif named this paradise Vinland, the land of wine. Today, we know it as Newfoundland, Canada. The Vikings had reached North America a full 5 centuries before Christopher Columbus. For a brief moment, the Norsemen tried to build a new world here. They constructed timber longhouses and explored the beautiful, wild wilderness. But this paradise came with a price. The Vikings were not alone. The sagas call the indigenous people they encountered Skraelings. Initial curiosity quickly turned into brutal conflict. Outnumbered and thousands of miles away from any hope of reinforcements, the Norse settlements in America could not hold. The winter winds grew harsh, and the attacks grew relentless. After only a few years, Leif Erikson and his men loaded their drakkar ships with lumber and grapes, turned their backs on the New World, and sailed home. The maps of the American coast were forgotten by the rest of Europe, locked away in the oral sagas of the North. But the achievement remained unshakable. Without compasses, without charts, driven only by iron will and wooden hulls, the Vikings had touched the edge of a new world. By the mid-11th century, the world was changing. The fierce pagan kingdoms of the North had slowly adopted Christianity, and the legendary age of longships and endless raiding was drawing to a permanent close. But history had saved one final magnificent spark of the old Viking fury. The year is 1066. King Harald Hardrada of Norway, known as the Last Viking, launches a massive invasion of England to claim its crown. He is a giant of a man, a veteran of countless wars from the halls of Constantinople to the fields of Kievan Rus. His army catches the English by surprise, but at a place called Stamford Bridge, the English king Harold Godwinson catches the Norsemen off guard. The Vikings are resting by the river, many without their heavy chainmail armor. As the massive English army charges toward them, the only thing separating the survival of the Norsemen from absolute slaughter is a single, narrow, wooden bridge. The sagas tell that as the Norse army scrambled to form a defensive shield wall on the far bank, one man stepped onto the bridge. He was a nameless Norse giant, a berserker, a warrior possessed by the primal rage of Odin. Armed with a massive two-handed Dane axe, this single warrior stood alone against an army of thousands. English soldiers rushed him one by one, his heavy axe cut them down. For hours, the bridge became a bottleneck of blood. Sagas claim he killed over 40 English soldiers single-handedly, holding the entire army at bay through sheer brute force. Realizing they could not defeat him in honorable combat, the English resorted to a deadly trick. One soldier climbed into a wooden barrel and floated underneath the bridge. Looking up through the gaps in the wooden planks, he thrust a long spear upward, piercing the berserker beneath his armor. The giant fell, and the bridge was taken. Harald Hardrada was killed later that day, marking the symbolic end of the Viking Age. The old gods faded into the mists of time, and the dragon ships ceased to sail. But the legend of the lone warrior on the bridge lived on forever, a final, defiant roar of an era built on iron, blood, and unyielding courage.